In September of 2002, a group of amateur divers ventured off the coast of Croatia to a beautiful island known as Šolta. They sailed a short distance from the shore and dove into an ominous hole at the bottom of the sea floor. Little did they know, this deadly cave killed virtually every amateur diver who dared to enter. In the end, one diver died in the most horrific and excruciating way imaginable, and it wasn't by drowning. These are the final moments of the Poganica Bay Tragedy. There's a small island off the coast of Croatia called Šolta. It isn't a big island, with a population of less than 2,000 people, while stretching only 19 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide. What made this destination so popular was that it was just a short ferry ride from Split, Croatia's second largest city, making Šolta the perfect day trip for travelers. The island is hilly, with beautiful pebble beaches and crystal clear water, which naturally made it a favorite spot for tourists all around Europe. As a destination hotspot, most of the island is relatively safe to venture off into and explore. However, there's one place that even the locals try to avoid. It's an underwater cave called the Poganica Bay Cave. This wasn't any ordinary cave, as it held a deadly reputation around the island. In fact, nearly everyone who has dared to enter Poganica has never returned, and the locals would often urge tourists to stay far, far away. On September 10th of 2002, 31-year-old Miroslav Kukla was on vacation with friends on Šolta Island. Around 8:30 in the evening, one of his friends suggested they go scuba diving. It wasn't an unusual request, as Šolta's clear waters made it a popular spot for scuba diving year-round. However, Miroslav and his friends weren't interested in just any regular dive. They wanted to explore the infamous underwater cave just south of the island in Poganica Bay. Despite being inexperienced divers, they ignored the cave's dangerous reputation. But getting there wasn't an easy task, as the locals didn't want to be responsible for the potential deaths of visiting tourists. Eventually, the group persuaded a boat driver to take them to the cave's entrance, just off the coast's shore. At around 9 p.m., Miroslav and his group of adventurers put on their dive gear and plunged into the water. Clad in a neoprene suit and equipped with a hefty 15-liter air cylinder, Miroslav relied on his wrist-mounted dive computer to guide him safely through his underwater journey. As the group approached 9 meters deep, they found the mouth of the sinister cave. This cavern's entrance, a mere 2 meters wide, ominously widened as it descended to the first dark corridor. But at 15 meters deep, a chilling choice presented itself. 2 paths split, leading to a shallow gallery and a perilously deep gallery. These 2 galleries twisted into the heart of the cave, with many small tunnels that veer off to the side. Many could easily vanish without a trace with a single wrong turn. Inside the cave, a deceptive silence hung in the balance, disturbed only by the gentle drift of fine silt. This silt, while seemingly innocuous, posed a treacherous hazard. A mere flick of a fin could stir up an impenetrable cloud, reducing visibility to 0. Even a high-powered flashlight couldn't cut through the dense fog of floating particles. Upon navigating the cave split, Miroslav, driven by a mix of courage and curiosity, chose the deeper, more daunting path, leading down to a chilling 57 meters, about 200 feet. This route boasted a dangerously steep drop, allowing divers to descend swiftly from 35 meters at the chamber's ceiling to 50 meters in a sheer vertical plunge. But despite his relatively basic training and limited diving experience, Miroslav boldly embarked on the descent, disappearing into the shadowy depths. At the base of this deep chamber, the temperature plummeted by 10 degrees to a frigid 14 Celsius. After touching the bottom at 50 meters, Miroslav began his ascent, first climbing back to the chamber's roof. It was then, in the middle of his upward ascent, he made a fatal error. Instead of heading towards the exit tunnel, he veered into the shallow gallery. Even under the best conditions, the entrance to the shallow gallery could deceitfully appear as the exit. However, in the slit-induced fog, this mistake was not just easy, but almost inevitable. To make things worse, Miroslav had consumed alcohol earlier in the evening, which now clouded his judgment. Now, roughly 25 minutes into his dive, the situation turned dire. Miroslav had only about 35 minutes of air left for both his ascent and the critical decompression stops required to avoid severe decompression sickness. Panic must have gripped him as he navigated through the shadowy tunnels, desperately searching for an exit. Back on the surface, by 10:30 p.m., the rest of the divers had returned to the boat, only to find that Miroslav wasn't there. Concerned, 2 divers re-entered the water, plunging back into the cave's chilling embrace to find him. After over an hour of fruitless searching, they surfaced at 11:41 p.m. with no trace of Miroslav to be found. The grim realization dawned that, unless Miroslav had miraculously found an air pocket, he would have exhausted his air supply. So, at 12:15 a.m., in a race against time, an emergency call was placed to the police in Split. By morning, police divers were navigating the waters of Poganica Bay Cave. 2 rescue divers entered the hole's entrance, tethered by a safety line. Yet, in a harrowing twist, one diver lost grip of the line and vanished into the void. His partner, in a desperate attempt to survive, scrambled through the murky tunnels, his air supply dwindling rapidly. With no choice but to forego decompression stops, he surfaced, only to succumb to severe decompression sickness. The fate of the diver who strayed was sealed in the cold, silent darkness of the cave, never to be seen alive again. And although a horrible tragedy, this doesn't even compare to the grueling death that Miroslav faced in the cave. Despite the casualty, the search continued. In the cave's winding tunnels, slivers of light hinted at the presence of air pockets, sparking hope that Miroslav might have found one in time. If he had survived, he would have been trapped in utter darkness for over a day by the time divers re-entered to continue their search. The next day, the missing police diver was discovered at 24 meters in the shallow gallery, but Miroslav was still nowhere in sight. The search then extended to the deep gallery, where they made a grim discovery at 54 meters. It was Miroslav's body, clad in full diving gear. His diving mask was off and his regulator dislodged, but the most chilling detail was that a knife was embedded in his chest. This horrific scene quickly transitioned from a rescue operation to a homicide investigation. As the investigation waited on analysis results, the shocking events painted a haunting picture of the final moments beneath the sea. Given these findings, it was likely that Miroslav died within 2 minutes of being stabbed. However, the data from Miroslav's dive computer provided further insights into his tragic end. It showed that he entered the water and descended smoothly to the cave's entrance, then proceeded directly to the deep gallery and swiftly reached the 50-meter depth. Almost immediately after reaching this point, he began his ascent, but his path became erratic as he moved within the shallow gallery's tunnels, possibly searching for an exit. Later, he descended again to around 40 meters and remained there for about 5 minutes before his graph depicted a final, steep descent to the location where his body was eventually discovered. This complex pattern of movement eliminated the possibility that he may have been stabbed on the boat and then dumped into the water. However, authorities still considered the possibility that a murder was meticulously planned, though highly unlikely. One theory proposed that the killer might have manipulated the dive computer to create a false dive profile. They could have tied the computer to a weighted line, lowered it to simulate Miroslav's movements, and then placed his body at the bottom of the cave. However, this idea was dismissed due to the cave's complex structure. Each theory brought its own set of complexities, but the evidence gradually narrowed the possibilities, leading investigators to a final, chilling sequence of events that unfolded for Miroslav. Having entered the water at 9:15 p.m., shortly after the rest of his diving party, Miroslav descended 9 meters to the cave's entrance. From there, he ventured deeper, choosing the route that led to the deep gallery, plunging down to 50 meters in a seamless dive. Upon reaching this depth, he immediately attempted to ascend, possibly aiming to exit the cave. However, a critical mistake occurred. Miroslav mistook the entrance to the shallow gallery for the cave's exit, likely due to the close resemblance or reduced visibility caused by disturbed silt. For nearly 30 agonizing minutes, Miroslav navigated the complex maze of the shallow gallery, his panic escalating as he realized he was hopelessly lost. Eventually, he found his way back to the deep gallery corridor, by which time he was dangerously low on air. In those desperate moments, he hovered under the cave ceiling, grappling with his dire situation. The fear of drowning loomed large, and Miroslav faced an unimaginable choice. What came next is a conclusion no one could have foreseen. Miroslav, overwhelmed by fear, and perhaps influenced by alcohol and nitrogen narcosis, made the harrowing decision to end his life by stabbing himself in the chest. Despite this, he likely still inhaled water during his final moments. In his attempt to avoid death by drowning, Miroslav chose to end his life by stabbing his chest. However, this most likely made the death 10 times more painful and excruciating. The suicide conclusion, though difficult to accept, seemed to align with the physical evidence and the harrowing circumstances Miroslav found himself in. Contributing factors such as his inexperience as a diver, the alcohol in his system, and the cave's challenging conditions underscored the tragedy of his decision. Miroslav's story not only highlights the inherent risks associated with cave diving, but also the profound psychological pressures that can arise in extreme situations.